Well, hi there, everyone, and welcome. I've got something a little bit different for you today. I hope you enjoy it. I'm doing a highlight reel of 5 of my favorite breakfast meals in a jar. Now, only one of these is pretty recent. The other 4 have been up on my channel for a good while, and I have so many new subscribers, I thought it'd be fun to do a review. Besides that, I haven't been able to even get into the kitchen to film because something big has happened at our house. This has happened. My daughter adopted a puppy. Meet Cowboy. He is such a cutie pie and he is so sweet. But oh my word, he is so full of energy and he requires a lot of monitoring. And since my daughter is taking college classes and working too, guess who gets to puppy sit? No, I'm exhausted. Nobody's getting good sleep around here. Don't let those cute little eyes fool you. He is a mess. We've never actually rescued a puppy before. We've always adopted older rescue dogs, so this training thing is new to me. All right, then let's get to it. This first recipe is for a gravy mix. Sausage gravy is definitely a favorite around here, and having this mix on hand is so very convenient. Here's how I put it together. So I'm going to start with a cup of our gluten-free flour. You could use regular all-purpose flour here, but I just am using our Thrive Life gluten-free flour. And then you add to that some instant milk powder. Because this is cream gravy after all, we need the heavy cream powder. That's Anthony's brand I get off of Amazon. The cornstarch is going to really help the texture of your gravy. And then the seasonings here. So I do a scant tablespoon of salt. So that sounds like a lot, but it's going to make 5 or 6 batches of gravy. And then if you're using table salt, I would cut that amount in half, by the way. And then there's some black pepper. And yes, I put cayenne in here because our sausage is very flavorful, but it's not spicy. There's no heat to it. So it needs a little bit of a kick. So add some cayenne. So just, whisk together your dry ingredients, and now it's time for the sausage. So here's the deal. Our sausage is amazing, but those pellets that it comes in, they're too big. They just don't rehydrate in the amount of time it takes to cook the gravy. So you're going to have to help it along, give it a head start, and crush it up in a baggie before you put it into the mix. Okay, and just combine this, stir it together. Now, sausage gravy is a very personal thing. I don't like a lot of sausage in my sausage gravy. I like a lot of gravy and not a lot of sausage. You can add as much sausage as you want into this gravy. It's totally up to you. So I store this, that's a 1.5 pint jar, and I just store it in my pantry. You can make sausage gravy in like no time flat in the mornings. It's so convenient to have on my shelf. It's just like having some of those envelopes of gravy mix that you would see at the grocery store. It's super easy. So when you go to prepare this, you're going to start with a couple of tablespoons of some sort of grease, either butter or that is bacon grease right there. And then you're going to add to it the sausage gravy mix, okay? 1/3 cup plus 1 tablespoon of the gravy mix, and just combine that together and then add water. And seriously, that's it. So our milk and our cream is already in the mix. So you're just adding water. Now, if you do want a creamier gravy at the end, you can always add a couple tablespoons of fresh heavy cream, or you could put more milk in there if that's what you prefer, but you don't need it. You can just add water, and there you go. You've got sausage gravy. Yeah, do whisk it a lot because you don't want lumps. Nobody likes lumps. Taste and adjust for seasonings if you need more salt or pepper. If it's too thick, then add more water. Here in the South, we like to serve our sausage gravy on biscuits. I have a fantastic biscuit recipe you should check out. Or you could serve it on toast or with eggs and bacon. It's rather delicious. I think you will really like this recipe. I mean, it's so simple, right? And it comes together really fast. So there you go, sausage gravy from a mix you keep on your pantry shelf. Now, if you leave out the sausage, you can just make this as a cream gravy mix, which you could put on chicken fried steak or mashed potatoes. My kids like to dip their chicken strips in it. This recipe is really versatile. You can think of it as a sausage gravy recipe or a cream gravy recipe. All right, this next video is a very filling breakfast called Mexican style scrambled eggs with potatoes and a side of refried beans. Now, this dish is very popular around here in South Texas, and that's for a good reason. It's delicious. This meal in a jar will leave you with several dirty dishes, but I think it's worth it, and it's nice to have some variety in your meals. Here's how you can assemble it. Now, in the bottom of a 24-ounce jar, you can add the red layer, the white layer, and then the green layer. Now, if you're watching your carbs, just leave out the potatoes. I think they're delicious in here, though. And that's what goes on the bottom of the jar, is that really nice green, white, and red layer, like the colors of the Mexican flag. Now, in order to prepare the eggs separately, they have to refresh separately. You need to put them in a baggie or something like that. So I have a sandwich size baggie, and I'm going to put half a cup of scrambled egg mix and then some pepper jack cheese. If you're wanting to feed more people, like if you want to feed maybe 4 people, increase that amount of eggs to maybe 3/4 of a cup of eggs and just add some extra water, and it would be plenty to feed 4 people. Seal up that bag. You need a second bag to put the refried beans in. Now, if you're not going to serve the refried beans, you could just use a smaller jar. Or if you want to serve the refried beans, but you don't want to put everything in this jar, just leave them in the can and bring them out when you're ready to prepare your dish. I like to season up these beans with Goya seasoning. About 1/4 teaspoon is all you need. Our beans are great, but they are not seasoned. They're just pinto beans, so they do need a little bit of seasoning to add some flavor. Seal up that bag. You can add an oxygen absorber, and then you can put on your lid and your ring. There you have it. This is huevos a la mexicana con papas y frijoles. And isn't it beautiful? Just look at those layers. I just think it's really pretty. All right, see all these things you have to get out in order to make this. You need 3 different things: a medium-sized skillet, a small saucepan, and a medium-sized bowl. So go ahead and get the baggies out of your jar, and then empty the contents of the jar into that medium-sized skillet. So that's the tomatoes, potatoes, onions, and green chilies. And you're going to add a cup of water to that and just kind of make sure everybody has access to that liquid. You might push it down just a little bit and just let it sit there. We're not going to turn on any heat. Let's go ahead and get all of these things refreshed first. And into a medium bowl, you can empty your egg baggie. That's the egg and the cheese, and I think I put a little bit of salt in there. You can add some pepper if you like. So 3/4 cup of water is really all you need. Give that a stir, and those eggs are going to rehydrate really easily. They're just a nice, smooth texture, and you can set that to the side. All right, we're ready for the refried beans, and those are literally just cooked pinto beans that they smush. And go ahead and add some water to that, give it a stir, and just let those sit. Those can start to rehydrate. Turn that heat on to medium. Those veggies were just sitting there and kind of absorbing the water for probably like 5 minutes or so. Oh yeah, I forgot to season the vegetables, which is silly. You need to season every layer. Once that water has evaporated, you can make room for some oil and butter, or you could just do all butter if you like. What you want to do here is saute those vegetables, because you're going to get a lot better flavor if you saute your vegetables. You're going to kind of fry those potatoes and those onions, and it's going to be incredible. All right, now you can put some heat on your beans and you'll need to just bring those up to a bubble. And you're just going to go back and forth between the veggies and the beans and just make sure, nothing's sticking on the bottom. Just stir every once in a while. Now I gave these a taste to see how they were doing. I thought they needed a little more salt and a little more time. The potatoes were not tender yet, so I let them go a little bit longer. And then once I felt like everything was good and tender, I lowered my heat and I was at probably a 2.5 or 3 out of 10. Now check on those beans and just let them boil for 4 or 5 minutes. Now the vegetables are ready for the eggs to be added. Add another tablespoon of butter to the pan. Your eggs need their own butter. And see how nice and smooth those eggs are. Yeah, Thrive Life has amazing scrambled eggs. And it's got that pepper jack cheese in there. And just go ahead and pour that in on top of the butter. I added a little black pepper here. Now, you can just scramble the eggs however you want to scramble them. I kind of like to let them sit there for a minute, and then I sort of kind of start to push the eggs, almost like you would do if you're making an omelet. I just gently push the eggs and just let them start to cook. You can do it however you like to scramble your eggs. But you want to make sure you keep kind of gentle heat. And every once in a while, check on those beans. When you get to this point where you can tell that they're drying out and thickening up, you can go ahead and turn off the heat because they are ready. They'll continue to thicken as they sit. And as you stir your eggs, you can just get them to the doneness that you're comfortable with. I sort of like a soft scrambled egg and not really a really dry scrambled egg, but it's totally up to you. Whatever you prefer. And you can taste them again, add whatever seasonings you like. But yeah, those are perfect for me. This is how I want to serve them up. And it's a good amount of food. This is gonna keep us full all morning long for sure. And see those beans get nice and thick. And we really like the refried beans as a side. That's how they are served in all the Tex-Mex restaurants around here. The breakfast plates all come with refried beans on the side and tortillas. So that's what I have here. I got a tortilla from the local bakery and I put some Cholula on the eggs, just a little hot sauce. I mean, they'd be great with any kind of salsa. I like cilantro. But yeah, isn't that pretty? You can see those green chili peppers, the tomatoes. Of course, we have the potatoes in there. And our eggs are just so tasty. I think it's a beautiful dish. It's nice and colorful, and it's just full of flavor. Okay, this next recipe will have you turn on your oven for some amazing cinnamon rolls. I've developed a shelf-stable recipe for a potato bread dough, and it's perfect to use for cinnamon rolls. Nice and light and fluffy. I'm starting with a quart-sized jar, and this recipe just makes 1 tray of cinnamon rolls. I got 10 cinnamon rolls. Into the jar, I already have 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and to that, I'm going to add our scrambled egg mix, as well as some sugar. It's a slightly sweet dough, so there's some sugar in there. Here are our leaveners, the baking powder, baking soda, and kosher salt. Make sure your baking powder is fresh. and that baking soda will react with the buttermilk that I'm putting in here, which is so good. And in go the mashed potato flakes. Into a snack size baggie, we're going to put the filling. And I like a simple filling. I just use brown sugar and cinnamon. And of course, we're going to add some softened butter to that to make it a really nice, sweet filling. All right, let's make the icing. Into a second jar, this is a pint-sized jar. We're going to add 1.5 cups of powdered sugar and some instant milk powder, butter powder, and vanilla powder. I like a lot of icing on my cinnamon rolls, and this makes a good amount of icing. All right, so this is what you could store on your pantry shelf. And if you give this recipe a try and you like it, then I'd make up a couple of different sets of these jars and just have them on your shelf. When you're ready to make cinnamon rolls, it will only take you about half an hour, start to finish, to make homemade cinnamon rolls. It's really great. All right, when you're ready to make them, you'll need to get out a couple of different bowls. I suggest starting with the filling just so it's ready. And in that medium-sized bowl, I've got 3 tablespoons of softened butter. The other 5 tablespoons of that 1 stick of butter we're going to use in the dough. But the first 3 tablespoons are used in the filling. And you can set that aside. I got out a large bowl for the dough, emptied the mix into there, and go ahead and stir it because everything was just layered in that jar, right? I'm adding 3/4 cup of water and 5 tablespoons of melted butter. So that's the rest of that stick of butter, and I melted it. You've got the potato flakes in there. They are going to be absorbing that water and that butter, the moisture that's in there. They are going to make your dough really soft and moist. So I like to go ahead and get my hands in there so I can feel it. I'm just kind of squeezing the dough together. You might be tempted to add more water at this point, but don't. Just hold off. Continue to kind of squeeze the dough and get the rest of those crumbs and those potato flakes and that flour. Try to incorporate it all together. It should be a sufficient amount of water. At this point, you have a very soft and slightly tacky dough. It should be, I say, slightly tacky, but not too sticky. It's a little bit tacky though. So you'll want to get out some extra flour, flour your surface, flour the top of your dough, and then also flour your rolling pin. And you should be able to work with this dough no problem. I'm able to lift it up, move it around. It is a little bit tacky, but it's not too sticky to do that. You just want to roll it out to a vaguely rectangle shape if you can possibly get it in that shape. And I just get out my pizza cutter and I square up those edges. And with the scraps, I just rolled that out and made a couple of little cinnamon rolls with that. I like using the softened butter method for my cinnamon roll filling versus the melted butter method. Have y'all ever made cinnamon rolls and you melted butter in the middle? I've done that before and I just find that it runs off of the dough. So I like using just softened butter for the filling because it stays put a little bit better. So start with the long edge and kind of keep it tight at the beginning, and then it will just start to roll on its own. And I made 2 little cute cinnamon rolls with the leftovers with my scraps of dough, and they turned out great. As far as slicing the cinnamon rolls, I just used a knife. There's lots of ways to slice a cinnamon roll. The dough is sturdy enough to where it handles the knife just fine, so I just used a knife. Arrange them in a buttered dish or a prepared dish, and you'll need to bake that at 375 for about 20 minutes or so. While your rolls are baking, go ahead and make your icing because you want to put it on the hot cinnamon rolls. So get out a medium-sized bowl. That is 2 tablespoons of water I started with, and then I added another half tablespoon or so. I like a nice thick icing for cinnamon rolls. Now this right here that you see, that's probably a little bit too thick, but I wanted to add an optional ingredient to mine, which is some cream cheese. I had this in the fridge and I really like cream cheese icing on my cinnamon rolls. So I thought I'm going to put a couple, maybe that's probably 3 tablespoons or so of cream cheese into my icing. That's optional, but I do like it. I think my cinnamon rolls baked for 21 minutes. And see how nice and risen they are? They poof up in the oven, expand. You want it slightly darkened on the top, but not too dark. But they really do expand in the oven and they hug each other. See how it looks kind of like a biscuit? But it's different than a biscuit. It's a lot more moist and soft and tender. And here comes that icing on the hot cinnamon rolls. And I just love the icing on cinnamon rolls. I think the more the better with this. And I'm not really even much of a sweet breakfast kind of gal. I like a savory breakfast, but I love cinnamon rolls. Like every once in a while, I like that icing to get all in the nooks and crannies. And they come out of the pan just beautifully. That soft dough and the gorgeous cinnamon swirl. That beautiful icing. It's just so pretty. And it smells divine. The dough is so tender and pillowy soft. It is just gorgeous. See how nicely it cuts? It's so moist, so tender, and absolutely delicious. These rolls are sweet, but not too sweet. They're soft, and I really do think they're like pillows, little pillows, tender, soft pillows. Next, I've got a wonderful quiche recipe for you. I'll include a link to my pie crust video in the description box below where I give more instructions about the pie crust itself. It's not too difficult, and it's super flaky, it's tender, and oh so yummy. And when you pair it with this quiche filling, oh, you've got a delicious breakfast. I'm starting with a 24-ounce jar. Of course, you could use a quart-sized jar if that's what you have. And I'm just putting the same amount of cheese as eggs in the bottom of this jar. I've got 2 tablespoons of the green onions that are going to go in there. And I'm using just some simple seasonings. Dry mustard is really good paired with anything with cheese in it. And then a pinch of cayenne, a pinch of nutmeg. And I suggest you go light on the salt just because the bacon's kind of salty, the cheese is kind of salty. Now I do like to keep my heavy cream powder separate just because I've found in working with this stuff that I like to combine it with water and blend it as to ensure that there are no lumps. So that's why I have kept that in a baggie. And this is what you would keep on your pantry shelf. And that pie crust mix is good for 3 or 4 months, something like that, on the pantry shelf. And then be sure to check the expiration date on your bacon bits, as well as your heavy cream. Just, kind of be aware of expiration dates. When you're ready to prepare this, you're just going to get out kind of a medium-sized bowl and be sure to preheat your oven to 400. Now, like I said, this is a half recipe. It's just enough for 1 pie crust, not the 2 pie crust recipe I gave y'all before. This is just for 1 crust. And the amount of ice water you add kind of depends on the weather a little bit, and evidently elevation, I have learned. So here in South Texas, we're pretty close to sea level and we're pretty humid. But I like to add, for half a recipe, I like to add about 3.5 tablespoons of water. At least I did this day. I started with 2.5 and then I added another tablespoon. And the reason was there were just some crumbs in the bottom of that bowl that really weren't mixing in very easily. They weren't incorporating with the rest of it. And I thought, yeah, it needs a little bit more water. So I added 1 more tablespoon, and then it just seemed like things were kind of combining better. The little crumbs at the bottom, they're mixing in, they're adhering to that ball, and that's what you're looking for. So yes, your hands are going to get messy on this one, but it's so worth it. This is a fantastic pie crust recipe. And I'll be sure to link my pie crust recipe video down in the description box below, and it'll have really good detailed instructions for you. And I like to flour my surface, flour my dough, and flour my rolling pin, just so nothing is sticking. I kind of wanted to make sure all of the surface had some flour on it, and then I flattened it into a little disc, and then I just started rolling it out. And you just want to roll it out to be the size of whatever pie plate you're going to put it in. For me, I'm using my grandmother's pie plate. I inherited that from her, and it's so special to me. My grandmother, this is my dad's mom. She was just famous for her pies. I mean, famous as in our family loved her pies. She's the one that would make those apricot fried pies that weren't fried. Oh, so good. Whenever we would go to visit them, she would have multiple pies for us. She would also fry chicken. And we always thought her fried chicken was the best in the world. And I still believe it's true. She had the best fried chicken and the best pies. All right, see how wonderful that pie crust is? It's not fussy. It's really easy to work with. So I'm just putting it in the pie plate there. And if you'll notice, like one little side of that pie crust is not quite as high as it needed to be. And I regretted that later because I couldn't fill it all the way to the top. But yeah, if you can, make sure that pie crust fits all the way up to the top of the sides. And here I am trying to be fancy and crimp the edges, but I was so bad at it, y'all. I had to fast forward that. You would definitely laugh at me. All right, so poke some holes in the bottom so it doesn't poof up on you too much. And then just blind bake that for about 10 or 12 minutes, just until it's lightly golden brown. And while that's baking, you can start your filling. I like to start with the heavy cream powder and go ahead and mix it up. So what I did, remember that's 1 cup of heavy cream powder. And in that blender cup, that's 1 cup of water. And we're just going to turn this into heavy cream. So empty that little baggie of powder into your blender cup and just give that a good blend, and that way you'll make sure there's no lumps. Okay, and then I just set that to the side, and into a large bowl, I emptied the egg and cheese mixture and added 1¼ cups of water. That amount of water should be perfect to rehydrate those eggs, the cheese, and the onions. And then you just go ahead and add the heavy cream. Of course, you could add other vegetables to this, like spinach or broccoli, but I'm keeping it pretty simple. All right, now let's saute that bacon. I like to put a little bit of butter in that pan. And then my oven timer went off and my crust was ready. Reduce your oven temperature down to 325. Your quiche is going to bake at a lower temperature than your crust did. And when your butter has melted, you can go ahead and add the bacon. You can add as many packages as you want. That's 2 packages of that bacon. And I like to saute it until it gets really foamy and very crispy. And then I cooled it for a little bit, and you definitely want to get rid of that excess grease. And I just use that paper towel method there. And after the bacon has cooled just a little bit, just a couple minutes, I added it to the egg mixture. And that is your filling for your quiche. All right, so I went ahead and put the crust on a baking sheet just to make it a little bit easier to get in and out of the oven. I decided to use a measuring cup to put that filling in kind of gently because that little bit of crust, that it just wasn't quite high enough on the side. I didn't want the filling to spill over and cause problems in the oven, so I just gently ladled in that filling. I had a little bit of extra, and I'll show you in a minute what I did with it. And you'll bake it for somewhere between 50 and 60 minutes, just until the middle is not jiggly. I had some extra filling, and I baked it just in a little ramekin, and it baked for probably 40 or 45 minutes. And it's wonderful. Don't waste any extra filling. Go ahead and bake that up. That's just like a crustless quiche, and it's so tasty. So here's our quiche when it comes out of the oven. It has a nice poof to it. It will sink as it cools, but it's just such a lovely egg dish. See how the green onions kind of floated to the top? You can see flecks of bacon there, and of course that cheese browned up really nicely. I just thought it was beautiful. I let it cool for probably 15 minutes while I visited with my daughter. And then when it's time to plate up, you can just get a knife and cut that into wedges. We got 8 wedges, but of course you could do 6 or even 4 giant wedges. That would be a really large serving. But here's our quiche Lorraine. Isn't that lovely? It's so beautiful. And y'all, it tastes amazing. The egg custard part is really nice and creamy. I love the green onions in there. I think it would be delicious even without the bacon. You could definitely use our sausage crumbles instead if you don't want to use the bacon. If you like quiche, I think you're going to like this one. It's sliced up beautifully and it cuts easily. And y'all, that crust, it's so good in that crust. I'm just a huge fan of the crust now. I fall more in love with it every time I make it. But see how nice this is? I think it would be wonderful, even for company. Okay, let's talk about the crust for a minute. Look at those flaky layers. Oh, I'm telling y'all, that's a really good recipe. I hope you try it. And finally, last but not least, my jalapeno cheddar breakfast biscuits. This recipe deserves all the love, y'all. It is fabulous. Now, there's 2 parts to this recipe, and the biscuits are great on their own. But then the sheet pan, eggs, and sausage are amazing too. They're great on toast or in a tortilla. You don't have to make both parts of this recipe, but if you do, I think you'll love it. I'm going to start by showing you my biscuit recipe. I have the original recipe up on my channel already, and there are several ways you can put this together. This is regular all-purpose flour. You could use a gluten-free flour. I have that recipe on my channel already. And to the flour, you're going to add several other dry ingredients. These are just regular biscuit kind of ingredients. I like the butter powder in here for the flavor, but you also are going to add some lard. You could use shortening for the fat in the biscuit. And if you haven't made my biscuits, y'all need to make these. These are wonderful, wonderful biscuits. I am including 3 tablespoons of sugar in this recipe. Now, you might think, well, that's a lot of sugar. That might be too sweet. But let me tell you what, it's not too sweet. It's not overly sweet. There's a slight sweetness in the background that pairs beautifully with the spicy jalapeno and the savory cheddar. The texture that you're looking for in this is kind of like the texture of sand, like wet sand, or you want to get the fat about the size of little peas or something. You want to get a good distribution of fat in the mix. And then you can just transfer that mix into a quart-sized jar. I am going to add some cheddar here, just in a layer on the top, just because I think it's pretty. You don't have to do that. You could mix the cheddar into the biscuit mix. That would be fine. But I would, if I were you, if you're going to do the jalapenos or the chili peppers, I would keep them separate because you'll want to hydrate those or refresh those separately just to make sure that they're good and refreshed and they don't burn in your biscuit. Now those are optional, by the way. I have one of my daughters does not like jalapenos in her biscuit at all, and you can leave those out and just do a cheddar biscuit, and you can put like a garlic butter on the top of those, and they're very much like the Red Lobster Cheddar Bay biscuits. They are fantastic. All right, now let me show you how I make the egg and sausage layer. I'm starting with the sausage crumbles that I have pulsed in the blender. You have to do that. They won't refresh in time if you don't do that, and you'll have crunchy sausage in your eggs, and it's just kind of weird. All right, and then in go the eggs and some instant milk powder. I'm seasoning these with just salt and pepper. It's totally up to you. You can add whatever seasoning you like. You can even add other things in there like green onions or bell peppers. It's up to you. You can do whatever you want here. All right, so this is what you could store on your pantry shelf. I actually got the inspiration for this recipe based on a local burger joint that has a breakfast menu item called a jalapeno cheddar biscuit, and they do a sausage patty on there with scrambled eggs, and it's so good. It's at a restaurant called Whataburger. It's a fast food burger joint, but oh my goodness, they have a really good breakfast biscuit, so that's what this recipe is based on. When you're ready to make it, what you'll do is start with the egg and sausage mixture, and you need to add hot tap water in there. The reason you do the hot tap water, I mean, it's not hot enough to cook the eggs or anything, but it will help that sausage to refresh better. For some reason, that sausage is just really stubborn, and it does not like to refresh very quickly. So I think if you add the hot tap water, you will help that process along. You don't want to put that into the oven for these sheet pan eggs and have crunchy sausage, right? So go ahead and use hot tap water, stir it really well, and then as you make the biscuits, every once in a while come along and give those a stir. Make sure that sausage is getting good and rehydrated. All right, for the biscuit portion of it, you'll just need to take out that little baggie of jalapeno peppers and put them into a little bowl with some water. You'll want to refresh these first just to make sure that they are nice and rehydrated, and then we'll add that to the biscuit. Now I added 2 tablespoons of water, but I think that was too much. I'm going to say maybe 1.5 tablespoons is plenty. Give it a stir, and you'll see that it immediately starts to soak up that water, and they'll plump up right away. So that's great. You can just set those to the side while you make the biscuit dough. So get out a medium bowl and empty your biscuit mix in there. And since I didn't mix my cheddar cheese in, I'm going to go ahead and mix it really nicely, get it good and incorporated. Now I used half a cup of cheddar. You could definitely add more, but I thought that the half a cup was plenty. And you're going to add around 2/3 of a cup of water. It kind of depends on the weather and just so many factors, but I added 2/3 of a cup and it was still a little bit on the wet side, but it's fine. It works out fine. This dough is really not fussy at all. I just added some extra flour when I was handling it. There you can tell that the jalapeno peppers are good and rehydrated, and so they're ready to add to that biscuit dough. And just try, if you have extra liquid like I did, just try and strain off that extra liquid. And then look at the amount of jalapenos here. I mean, you wouldn't think that 2 tablespoons of jalapeno peppers would be enough in this biscuit dough mix, but it really is a good distribution of jalapenos throughout each biscuit. I think 2 tablespoons perfect. Now if you added the Thrive Life green chilies, you might need to increase that amount just a bit. All right, and you'll want to flour your surface and then just turn out your dough onto the surface. And see how mine's a little bit on the liquid side? No big deal. I just floured the top of the dough and then floured my hands. And I just started patting it until I shaped it into a circle. And because it was a little bit moist, I added a little extra flour on the sides, just enough to where it didn't stick to the surface and it didn't stick to my hands. And then I rolled it out just a little bit, and I'm going to show you a technique that creates layers in your biscuit dough. You just fold the dough onto itself a couple of times, and that creates the layers. And that's all there is to it. Then I just patted it down again, shaped it into a circle again, and then I'll get my rolling pin and just barely roll it out just a little bit. It was maybe 7 or 8 inches across. Just, you don't want to do it too thin here. You want your biscuit dough to be at least 1/2 inch thick. You can get your biscuit cutter, flour it, and just start cutting out some biscuits. I had a parchment lined baking sheet over on the side, and that is where I put my biscuits. A lot of times I don't even do a cutout biscuit because I think it's kind of fussy and it takes extra time, but today I did. It's up to you. You could make these into drop biscuits if you like, but I think the cutout round biscuits are really nice for the biscuit sandwich that I'm going to show you. So I just re-rolled my scraps and cut out a couple more biscuits. I got a total of 8, and there they are in the parchment lined baking sheet. I do recommend you do a milk wash. I think it gives beautiful brown tops to your biscuit, so I really do like to do that. And it's really easy to do. You don't need but maybe a tablespoon of milk, so it's a great time to bust out the Thrive Life Instant Milk Powder if you just need a tablespoon. All right, you'll bake those at 400 degrees. Mine baked for exactly 15 minutes. Don't forget to stir that egg and sausage mixture. Towards the end of the bake time for your biscuits, you'll want to get out a sheet pan and put some parchment paper on it, spray it really well, and pour out your egg and sausage mixture. Set that to the side. We're going to put that in the oven in just a minute. Pull out your biscuits. Aren't they gorgeous? Okay, and then reduce your oven temperature down to 350. And what I did was I left my oven door open for like 10 seconds to help that process along. So you'll want to bake your eggs just until they're not jiggly in the middle. So mine baked for I think 8 minutes. And I put some melted butter on the top of my biscuits, but aren't they gorgeous? And see those layers? You can see where it helped to fold over that biscuit dough to make those layers. All right, and here come my eggs and sausage. And see, I can jiggle the pan and there's nothing wiggling in the middle, so I know they're done. And you can run a knife along the edge there. I sprayed the edges of my pan really well and it didn't really stick. I like to cut that in half and then cut that into 8 portions because I have 8 biscuits. Now, I almost hesitated to even show y'all the eggs made this way just because they look kind of funny. Honestly, they're not very appetizing to look at because the sausage floats to the top and it's like an egg layer at the bottom and a sausage layer at the top. But I'm telling you what, these things taste amazing. And just look at the interior of my biscuit. Isn't that beautiful with the flecks of cheddar and the beautiful green jalapeno peppers? Oh, y'all, it's so good. All right, and then you can just get you a portion of your egg and sausage out. It didn't really stick. It was just the parchment paper under there was wrinkled. But yeah, and just put it on your biscuit and there you have your yummy breakfast. Now, I like to fold that over and make a double layer of egg. I think that's the perfect proportion of egg and sausage to biscuit is if you double it over like that. Isn't that gorgeous? Just look at that biscuit. Oh, I was so pleased, and I cannot tell you how delicious these are. The eggs are so soft and tender. You would not think that looking at them, would you? And the sausage is super flavorful. Yeah, that is such a wonderful recipe. I hope you give it a try. I hope you try all of my recipes and let me know how they turn out for you. If you enjoy my meal in a jar recipes and would like to have them in the form of a cookbook, please consider supporting me and purchasing my ebook. You can download it and print out any recipes you're interested in. My website is called thefreezedriedfoodie.com. I'll link to it below where you can purchase the ebook. Well, thanks so much for watching today. I appreciate you. And as always, God bless. And until next time, y'all take care and keep thriving.